The year 1241 witnessed a cataclysmic storm brewing on Europe's eastern horizon. The Golden Horde, spearheaded by descendants of the legendary Genghis Khan, had unleashed an era of unparalleled destruction and conquest. From the vast steppes of Mongolia, they swept westward, shattering established orders and sowing terror across Eurasia. Their military machine, a highly disciplined and mobile force of mounted archers and lancers, seemed unstoppable. By 1240, they had razed Kiev, the heart of Kievan Rus', a pivotal moment signaling their impending advance into Central Europe. This was not merely a series of raids, it was a systematic annexation and subjugation. Europe, fragmented and religiously divided, watched in growing horror. The Pope called for crusades, yet the political realities of the Holy Roman Empire versus the papacy often overshadowed the existential threat from the East. Emperor Frederick II was excommunicated, a vivid illustration of the continent's internal strife, even as the Mongol horde stood at its very gates. The sheer scale and speed of the Mongol advance were unprecedented. They covered hundreds of kilometers in weeks, their intelligence networks providing intricate details of enemy forces, terrain, and political alliances. Their logistical genius allowed them to sustain vast armies far from their homelands, often by living off the land, a practice that devastated local populations. On April 9, 1241, near Legnica in Silesia, a combined European army, primarily Polish and German forces led by Duke Henry II the Pious of Silesia, faced a smaller but disciplined Mongol detachment. The Battle of Legnica was a devastating defeat for the Europeans. Henry II was killed, his head reportedly paraded on a spear. The Mongol tactics, including feigned retreats and flanking maneuvers, proved superior to the heavy European cavalry charges. Just 2 days later, on April 11, 1241, the main Mongol force, under the direct command of Subutai and Batu Khan, delivered a crushing blow to the Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohi, also known as the Battle of the Sajo River. King Bela IV of Hungary barely escaped with his life, his kingdom lying in ruins. The victory at Mohi opened the gates to Central Europe. Hungary was meticulously pillaged, towns razed, populations slaughtered or enslaved. Estimates suggest that between 15% and 25% of Hungary's population perished during the initial Mongol occupation. The Mongols penetrated deep into Austria, reached the Adriatic coast, and sent scouting parties as far as Neustadt, just south of Vienna. Panic gripped Western Europe. Chroniclers wrote of the Tartar terror, fearing the end of Christendom itself. Letters from contemporary figures like Pope Gregory IX and Emperor Frederick II illustrate the profound alarm felt across the continent. Frederick II, recognizing the dire situation, wrote to other monarchs, urging a united front, but his pleas largely fell on deaf ears, testament to Europe's persistent political disunity. Then, abruptly, the Mongols withdrew. By early 1242, their armies began to pull back from Central Europe. They crossed the Danube, retreating through Hungary, Bulgaria, and Wallachia, eventually consolidating their forces in the vast steppes north of the Black Sea, establishing the Golden Horde's permanent westernmost domain. The sudden withdrawal has long been a subject of historical debate, often wrongly attributed to a singular, fantastical, forbidden weapon or a miraculous intervention. The truth, far more complex and rooted in political succession and environmental factors, reveals the intricate tapestry of historical causation. The primary and most widely accepted reason for the Mongol withdrawal was the death of Ogedei Khan, the Great Khan, on December 11, 1241, in Karakorum, the Mongol capital. Ogedei, the third son of Genghis Khan, had been elected Great Khan in 1229. His death initiated a period of regency and succession struggles within the vast Mongol Empire. According to Genghis Khan's Yasa, Code of Law and Tradition, all princely heirs, Chinggisids, were required to return to Mongolia for the Kurultai, the imperial diet, to elect a new Great Khan. Batu Khan, the commander of the Western Campaign and grandson of Genghis Khan, was a primary contender, or at least a kingmaker. His presence was crucial for influencing the election and protecting his interests. Without a definitive Great Khan, the unity of the sprawling Mongol Empire was threatened. The various Khanates, including Batu's Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate, and the Ilkhani, later formed in Persia, operated with considerable autonomy but remained nominally under the authority of the Great Khan. Ogeday's death plunged the empire into political uncertainty. Batu, as a senior prince, could not ignore the call to return. This was not a minor inconvenience, it was a fundamental requirement of their political system. To remain campaigning in Europe would be to risk losing influence, territories, and even his life in the upcoming power struggle. However, attributing the withdrawal solely to Ogeday's death simplifies the interwoven factors. The Mongol campaign in Europe, though remarkably successful, was also stretching their logistical capabilities to their limits. Their lines of supply were tenuous, traversing vast distances and hostile territories. The resources of Hungary, while rich, were finite, and the Mongols had thoroughly plundered them. Sustaining an army of perhaps 100,000 to 150,000 men and their horses required immense fodder and supplies, particularly through the harsh European winter of 1241 to 1242. The forbidden weapon in this context was not a single artifact, but a combination of challenges often underestimated in traditional narratives. One critical, often overlooked, forbidden weapon was the European topography and infrastructure. The dense forests of Central Europe, the numerous fortified castles, and the unyielding resistance of some local populations, particularly in Bohemia and Austria, made the Mongol advance more challenging than their earlier campaigns in the open steppes or the readily conquered plains of Rus. While they skillfully bypassed many fortifications, the sheer number of castles across Hungary and the Holy Roman Empire presented a logistical nightmare for a siege-oriented army that relied on its speed and mobility. Each siege consumed time, resources, and men, slowing their overall advance. The Mongols typically avoided prolonged sieges unless absolutely necessary, preferring to outmaneuver and destroy their opponents in open battle. The European landscape with its cities and castles was not conducive to their preferred style of warfare. Moreover, the climate of Europe, particularly the unseasonably wet winter of 1241, played a significant role. The severe weather turned roads into quagmires and made river crossings treacherous. The horses, central to the Mongol military machine, needed vast amounts of pasture, which became scarce during the winter months and in heavily ravaged territories. The cold and damp would have also taken a toll on the men, who, despite their famed resilience, would have faced unfamiliar diseases and difficult living conditions far from their accustomed steppes. The marshy terra, softened by winter rains, also hampered the maneuverability of their cavalry. Additionally, the devastation wrought by the Mongols themselves became a self-defeating forbidden weapon. Their scorched earth tactics in Hungary, while effective in crushing resistance and denying resources to their enemies, also stripped the land bare. By early 1242, after months of occupation, the resources of Hungary were severely depleted. Supplying their massive cavalry with fodder and sustenance from an already devastated landscape was increasingly problematic. This was exacerbated by the logistical difficulties of maintaining supply lines back to the Golden Horde's base in the Pontic steppe, many thousands of kilometers away. The forbidden weapon also included a misinterpretation of intelligence. The Mongols, accustomed to vast empires with centralized power, believed they had effectively decapitated Central Europe after Mohi. They expected Western European rulers to either capitulate or present a cohesive, single-fronted opposition. Instead, they encountered a patchwork of independent fiefdoms, kings, and nobles, each with their own armies and loyalties. While this disunity initially aided the Mongol advance, it also meant there was no single head to strike to force a surrender. Conquering Europe would have required an endless series of localized campaigns against countless fortified strongholds, a slow and resource-intensive process that deviated from their strategy of swift, decisive victories against centralized powers. The initial withdrawal enabled by Ogeday's death allowed Batu Khan to consolidate his position within the Mongol Empire. While he sent representatives to the Kurultai, he ultimately did not attend in person, opting to secure his domain in the west. The ensuing regency of Torajin Khatun, Ogeday's widow, from 1242 to 1246, created a period of internal instability and suspicion among the Chinggisid princes. This internal focus further diverted Mongol attention from renewed large-scale campaigns into Europe. The election of Guyuk Khan, Ogeday's son, in 1246, did not immediately resolve the internal tensions. Instead, it exacerbated the rivalry between Gyuk and Batu, preventing a unified command for another Western invasion. It is crucial to note that the Mongols were exceptionally good at gathering intelligence. They had detailed maps and reconnaissance reports of much of Europe, including cities like Vienna and Venice. Messengers had traveled as far as Germany. They had carefully scouted the lands, indicating a long-term plan for conquest, not just a raid. Indeed, Subutai, one of Genghis Khan's greatest generals, had meticulously planned the European campaign for years, gathering intelligence through spies and merchants. His strategy was to hit Central Europe in a coordinated, multi-pronged attack to prevent a unified European response, which was precisely what transpired at Legnica and Mohi. The idea of a forbidden weapon oft conjures images of a magical artifact or a devastating new technology. In reality, the most potent forbidden weapon was the combination of distance, logistics, climate, terrain, and the complex internal politics of the Mongol Empire. These practical limitations, amplified by the unexpected death of the great Khan, created an insurmountable barrier to further European conquest. The Mongols were not defeated on the battlefield in Europe. They withdrew due to a confluence of internal and external factors that made continued expansion unfeasible and politically dangerous for their leadership. The legacy of the Mongol threat, however, profoundly impacted Europe. Military reforms were initiated, fortress building was accelerated, and diplomatic efforts were made to understand and counter the Eastern threat. The invasion contributed to the decline of feudalism in some regions and indirectly fostered commercial ties as European merchants sought to navigate the vast Mongol trade routes, the Pax Mongolica, that connected East and West. Yet the fear of their return lingered for generations. The Mongols did return to Europe in force in the 1280s, but this was a separate campaign by the Nogai Horde, a semi-independent khanate of the Golden Horde, and primarily focused on Hungary and Poland. These were raids, not large-scale attempts at conquest and permanent occupation orchestrated by the Great Khanate, which had by then fractured into independent states. The central, unified Mongol Empire never again launched a coordinated, full-scale invasion of Western or Central Europe, with the explicit goal of subjugation. The 1241 to 1242 withdrawal marked the permanent western frontier of their imperial ambition from the perspective of the Great Khans. In conclusion, the forbidden weapon that caused the Mongols to withdraw from Europe was not a singular marvel but a complex interaction of factors. The death of Ogedei Khan triggered a necessary return of princes for the Kurultai, a cornerstone of Mongol political order. This political imperative was supported by the severe logistical challenges of maintaining a massive army in a distant, devastated, and geographically difficult European theater. The unfamiliar terrain and climate, combined with the successful, albeit destructive, looting that depleted local resources, rendered sustained occupation increasingly difficult. The internal political dynamics of the vast Mongol Empire, even more than any external European resistance, ultimately defined the limits of their westward expansion. The Mongols never truly returned to Europe in the same unified, centrally planned, and overwhelmingly destructive manner, leaving behind a continent scarred but ultimately saved by a combination of fortune and the vast, intricate mechanisms of history.